So in our last video, I made a little bit of a mistake where I was using the rotate tool and holding down the Alt or Option key in order to get these doubled on either side of the watch. And I thought it looked okay, but looking in closer at my grid, I definitely determined that these are not an absolute perfect mirror. So let's go ahead and use the mirror tool for real. I'm going to delete this guy. I like the orientation of this thing. I will make sure that this is grouped by selecting it all and hitting Command G. Now I hit the mirror tool, or the reflect tool, which is O, don't ask me why, right under the rotate tool. That guy is selected. I'm going to reposition the axis that defines the mirror with the first point. But then for the second part of that axis, I'll just go up with my arrow and hold down Shift, and then drag slightly from left to right. And then the computer understands that I want to reflect this object perfectly on either side of that vertical axis. So I do that. Forgot to hold down the Alt key. Do it again. Oy vey. Man, sometimes all these keys you got to hold down at the same time can be awfully confusing. So here's holding Alt, here's holding Shift. Ta-da! We finally got it. Okay, so now we've got our start and stop buttons right there. Now, at this stage, really, once you've got it all done, you can, turn off the grid and then zoom back out and look at it. I do not find this to be very satisfying. I totally know what it is, so but it just doesn't look that good, and I think the proportions are a big part of it, and color too. So let's head in and do a couple more tricks to make this thing look a little more complex. One thing I might do, for example, is to start to add in some rounded corners, because this thing is relatively square. I will Shift Command G to ungroup this guy and click right here, and what you'll see here in the corners are these little white dots, and this is a fairly recent update to Illustrator, and if I click on it, I may have to double click, it'll bring up this transformation window, and then I look down in here and I can see that we're establishing the corner radius for the object. For what we're going to do, you're going to want to leave the chain chained, and just take a wild guess at what you think this value should be. You should only have to enter it once, and then it will update to all the rest of the parts of the rectangle. You can see that's far too big. So let's go ahead and do something like maybe 0.05, and that starts to be a little more pleasing, right? So now that guy starts to refine itself a little bit. I also know when I was looking at the original picture of this thing, you'll see if I collapse my illustration layer, it's easier just to show one or the other. It appears that there are these sort of knurls on this thing that allow you to get a grip on it when you're trying to twist it. And I think it would be nice to represent those. So let's get our drawing back. Let's get our grid back up. And I'm going to grab the line tool, and I'm just going to snap to the grid and make a vertical line like that. It starts out as transparent and transparent. So let's double click on the stroke, and let's make it a bit of a darker gray. If you want to cheat, one fun way to do that is to select only web colors, and the benefit there is that it breaks things down into a fairly even set of steps if you want to experiment with, say, different shades of teal or gray or whatever it happens to be. So I'm going to pick a darker gray than I currently have, and then I'm just going to get some random stroke. In this case, it's 1 point. I clearly can't make it 5 point like the other lines because that'll just be way too fat. But maybe I could do something like half of that, like 2.5. Might still be too fat, but we're going to find out. Now I switch to the black arrow, and I go to the center here, and then as I drag this thing to the right, I'm going to hold down the Option key. Why can I not get this thing working today? It looks like when I had my mouse hovered over the center, that somehow interferes with it, whereas I get the copy notification as I head up to the top of the line. So drag that over with Alt, and then I can hit Command D, 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 just to keep doing what I was doing before, more of the same, essentially. So now if I back out, you can see that this is starting to get more refined visually, so I like where this is heading. I think another thing I'd like to try to do is to make these stems a little bit darker, and it could be interesting to make them the same color as these guys. So I'll hit V, select this box, and then hit I, and click on those lines. Now you'll notice initially that what I'm copying is the stroke color and the fill color, stroke being dark and the fill being transparent. So I just need to come over here and reverse that relationship. and then I get something like this. So that's starting to look interesting too. I like the fact that this is sitting in front of the ring. I do not like the fact that it's sitting in front of the clock face, so we need to move it backwards in the layer hierarchy. A couple ways to do that. If we look up here in layers, you can do it visually. You can see that anything I have selected is going to show up with a colorful box over here to the right. So I can try to determine where the clock face is. See, it's all the way down here at the bottom. And then I can go back up through all my graphics and take this guy and drag him down with the mouse until he's all the way at the back. Or, maybe more simply, I'll right-click and then say Arrange and Send to Back. Because I don't have a background color sitting here, there's nothing to get in front of it. So right now this guy is all the way at the back. Now, of course, I have to fix this one. So I might say right-click, Arrange, Send to Back, and then now that guy's in back. So, I mean, I could have done those steps in a different order, but hopefully you get the idea. Why don't we also try shift-clicking these two guys, ungrouping a couple times, shift-clicking those two, and then hitting I to grab that color again. That actually might be a little too dark. We can take them and arrange them and send the back, so they're also behind the clock face. And then I'm getting the suspicion there might be more than one rectangle here. Yeah, interesting. I don't know where that extra one came from. So the darkness of these ones I feel like don't work in the same way that this one does. Perhaps it's because of the black cap and the fact that they seem to push so far into the background. So I'll shift select those two, I, and then pick up this original color. You know, if you wanted, if you don't want to stop there, we could go back to the color picker. We could turn off only web colors and just make this, you know, ever so slightly darker. So now when I turn off my grid, if I take a, you know, I'll see there's a very slight visual division there. It's just up to you. It depends on how you're deciding to arrange, you know, how many colors you're using, how big the steps are in between them, and so forth. I kind of like that. Let's see what it looks like if I do this. Ah, that's pretty tight. Maybe I'll go with something like that. I think now that I've been working, we've sort of identified that my original 8 subdivisions per major grid division wasn't quite small enough, so now it's 16 subdivisions, which means that I can come back in and grow and shrink things a little bit. So let's hold down Option and Shift and make this watch face a little bit fatter, right? So that proportion seems to match up with these better. That means that maybe my whatchamacallit needs to be, my little arm needs to be a little bit shorter. If I want to drag individual elements of a shape like that, I can use the white arrow, you know, just to drag this one little piece like that. Hide the grid, deselect to make sure nothing is currently active. So I feel like that's starting to go somewhere. Perhaps this thing would look a little bit better if I had a red second hand as well. Okay, we'll just do that one real quick. I think that's going to work. So I'll select the line. I'll go up to the Rotate tool. I'll reposition the center down here, and then hold down Option, and then just pull this thing around. I'll have it maybe point right up at this button. And then I'll go back to the color picker and make it red, as it seems to be often the case with these stopwatches. And then I'll say Arrange, Send to Back. That's going to hide it because it's too far back. And now I can look here on the upper right and just drag it right above the white part of the clock face. Or maybe that needs to go right there. Something like that. So, as in all these projects, this is a great case of me saying, I'm trying to get you started. I'm trying to show you my development. As an example, I don't think that this particular graphic is perfect. In fact, I think it's still pretty flawed. There seems to be way too much empty space down here, so perhaps I could investigate, you know, continuing to illustrate a reflection, or you could get into like a suggestion of a shadow if you want. But really, I want you guys to be able to focus on the work that you're doing instead of me showing something that's absolutely complete and held up as an example of what is perfect. So this is an example about how you get this work done, but the specific way you go about it is up to you.